'tis the season to cozy up with all your favorite holiday movies and shows.
You coming?
Where?
To the North Pole, of course!
Like A Very Jonas Christmas Movie and Home Alone on Disney+.
Should I burn down the joint? I don't think so.
Then snuggle up with The Polar Express and National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation with Hulu on Disney+.
I think we're all in for a very big Christmas treat.
This season, there's something for everyone with Hulu on Disney+. Bundle subscription required. Terms apply. Visit disneyplus.com/Hulu for details.
Hey, what's up, y'all? Kelly Clarkson with Wayfair. My favorite thing about the holidays? Decking out my whole house. It's not a competition, but if it was, well, I'd win the season with Wayfair. Outdoor inflatable Santa? Got it on Wayfair. Trees, lights, and ornaments? Wayfair. Hosting must-haves like dining sets, beds, sheets, and towels? Wayfair. For everything in your style delivered with fast and free shipping, visit wayfair.com or the Wayfair app to win the season. But again, it's not a competition.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
This is your invitation to a journey where relationships are dissected, science is simplified, and the news is hilariously twisted. The Last Show with David Cooper.
A lot of love stories begin in messy ways. Overlap, secrecy, blurred lines. But does taking somebody from a relationship, mate poaching as it were, change how safe and good you'll feel in that relationship in the end? Well, we're going to talk about what the research says about stealing that special someone away from someone else. I'm here with Lucia O'Sullivan, a social psychologist from the University of New Brunswick, who's written on mate poaching. Lucia, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
I'm sure there's like an academic definition of mate poaching. And while academic definitions are sometimes too technical, I do want to know, like, how would you define a mate poacher or a mate poachee, I suppose?
Well, we do find that it's typically a person who has a habit of trying to take somebody else's partner. So we tend to think of our relationships. Most people think that they are to be monogamous, at least serially monogamous, exclusive in the sense of sexual and romantically, only with that one partner. So a poacher is someone who tries to, and often is successful, at stealing somebody else's partner away.
Oh, that frame that the partner's like property and it's theft is a bit overdramatic, but I get it. What made you want to study these kinds of relationships that begin this way?
Well, we really began with the study of infidelity. I had a grad student who was really focused on that. She had a fairly wayward boyfriend, and I had always wanted to avoid studying it because I thought you could never really get honest and valid results. But, you know, with online surveys and different ways you could do validity checks, we got some good research. But what we found was, very interestingly, very few couples have ever discussed what the rules are about maintaining their exclusivity. So there's a lot of disconnect between them.
It's funny. Usually it's the couples that are polyamorous or open that allow themselves to, have other relationships. They're the only ones that talk about the boundaries, which is so weird to me.
Yeah, exactly. Because everyone seemed to be saying, yes, we're monogamous or exclusive. And then when we asked them, have you ever had a direct conversation about this? They would almost always say no. And then when we even tapped what they thought was acceptable or not, there was so much discrepancy. We marveled that anyone manages. But that led us to this idea that a lot of people have a value of being exclusive, and yet their relationships tend to overlap. So when they're moving on, there is a period where they have two relationships going on at the same time. And very few people discuss that, at least not in terms of infidelity, but that is exactly what it is. And that's where mate poaching comes in, because somebody is entering or taking a person away, in a sense. You're right about the commodity thing. I've never thought about that. From an established relationship.
There's often like platitudes like once a cheater, always a cheater. There's often platitudes like if your relationship starts a mess, it's going to end in that same mess. Are there truth to these views? Like if a relationship starts in a kind of poaching setting, in the end, the people in it will report a lower relationship satisfaction?
So yes and no.
Oh, good. I like an answer like that.
Yes, that a lot of poachers have a habit of poaching, and so they like relationships or they establish relationships not from a clean, fresh start. We did this fun study actually where we found that women in particular find men, I'm talking about heterosexual attractions anyway, more attractive if they think he's already taken. It's called the wedding ring effect. But men don't have the same. They're like, she's taken, she's not, she's cute. So, but we did find women thought that the idea of being vetted by someone else was more appealing. So there are certainly people who notice those who are taken more readily, and they seem to have a habit. But the one exception to this was the case where they had no history of ever having mate poached or mate switched in the middle of a relationship. They overlap for sure, but they often describe that new relationship as absolutely compelling, the one true love, the soul mate, and who they were meant to be with all
Interesting.
from the start.
So if you've only ever mate poached once, you don't necessarily report lower relationship satisfaction, but if you do it all the time, maybe you do. Is that a fair extrapolation from what you're saying?
Yeah,
it's like you have a one time in life poach where you won't mess things up if you do it, and if you go over that, you will. Am I being crazy here to say this?
No, that's it. Sometimes that one-off is a real one-off, but you have to wait to see if it is. But people who have habitual overlap in their relationships tend to have worse quality relationships than the ones who have sort of clean ends, clean starts.
Is it just because it's hard to trust somebody when you know they've cheated in the past and you know you've done that activity with them in the past in some sense?
Yes, we think so, that there's just a wobbly beginning that doesn't always overlap. But there's probably far more to it. We know one personality trait that corresponds to mate poaching is sociosexuality, which generally means a roving eye, an appreciation of more than one person at a time.
I love that word, sociosexuality. I've never heard it. It just means that you're very social and sexual at the same time? Like, what is this?
Essentially. Yeah, you apply a broad social approach to your sex life.
I suppose someone like that should not be in a monogamous relationship anyway. Okay, so does this research suggest some people are like wired less for traditional relationship paths if they end up wanting to cheat or wanting to overlap or wanting to poach a mate in the relationship, but then dissatisfied in the end? Like, what could we say about people who end up poaching a lot?
I struggle with this really, David, because if I take more of an evolutionary perspective, as a type of ape, we are not actually that monogamous. We're not good at it. We often fail at it. We have many, many examples of that, and any study that's conducted half well will show that we have fairly high rates of infidelity. So in many ways, I think exclusivity or monogamy is such a compromise of what we do naturally. We do find people attractive. We are drawn to them. Even babies' pupils will dilate when you give them an attractive photograph. And so to forever monitor our natural ability to be drawn to others all the time, and particularly if someone finds us attractive, it's difficult. It takes, a lot of willpower sometimes to avoid those scenarios and those situations. But so I think there are some people who just are less worried about that and just much more interested in the excitement and novelty than others. Whereas some people who really think it's absolutely important to ensure exclusivity where it's expected. And of course, underlying all that is an issue of trust and secrecy. Secrecy is such a bad thing in a relationship often.
It is. For relationships that started this way, and I met my lovely partner Miranda when I was still married, but I guess we fall under the once-in-a-lifetime exception, and we've been together 12 years and whatever. But for people listening whose relationship started this way, what advice or what could they take from your findings to make sure things don't go south?
I think it's natural to want to have somebody as when one relationship's ending, it's often the case that there's a new one right in hand. I don't think we should beat ourselves up about that too much. It's not ideal necessarily, but also it's not uncommon. I think if, you could probably survey everyone within 100 yards of both you and I and find that almost all started and end that way.
At Sierra, discover joyous deals on great gifts for everyone on your list, like cozy slippers, ski gear, fishing poles, bikes, large kayaks, even larger canoes. Whew, which might lead to another discovery. Wrapping gifts is the only sport you need to stay fit this season. 'Tis the season to discover great gifts at unexpectedly low prices. Sierra, let's get moving.
Sugar dating, where one person receives money, gifts, even lavish gifts, in exchange for intimacy or companionship. They're often called sugar babies, sugar mamas, sugar daddies, and it often gets reduced to jokes, scandal, moral panic. But what actually happens inside these arrangements? Well, we are here with somebody who studied them. She is named Lucia O'Sullivan. She's a social psychologist at the University of New Brunswick. Lucia, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
I think there's a lot of judgment around these arrangements, so much so that they get made fun of on TV, online. But let's face the facts here. There are websites where people make these matches, and there's people in these relationships. So they're worthy of study and worthy of talking about and taking seriously, aren't they?
Yeah, they really are. And young people are very familiar with them. I think overstated the numbers that we see on these websites about how many people are really signing up.
Sure. Yeah. It's like, ask any dating site what their numbers are, and they're going to inflate them potentially.
Yeah.
But how did you actually find people in these setups? Like, how were you able to find them to actually research them?
We actually used a method I don't often use, which is going through social media. And so it's a little bit of what we call snowball sampling, where, some people who are involved in it give the link to other people who are involved in it. And we ended up, it is a fairly hard to reach population. So we had to be a little creative about how we surveyed people who are in sugar relationships. And to be fair, most of these were young women, and they were in relationships with sugar daddies. And the other different combinations of that are far less common than that particular type.
Now, I think a lot of us assume these relationships are like ugly, that the power dynamics are mostly the person with the cash, the daddy, or I suppose occasionally the mama, really, has an unfair power dynamic with the baby. This language is so weird to me.
Oh, I know. It's so demeaning, but
regardless, the person who is dating, who's got the cash, I guess, or got the lavish gifts with which you can shower on the other person, are the power dynamics in practice like that? What did you actually find when you talked to people?
That was absolutely the most interesting thing about it. We were particularly interested in their perceptions of the power dynamics. So not just the babies, but the daddies too. The babies say, I have a lot of power here. I get to choose who I connect with. I'm the attractive young person, and they want to spend time with me. They want to give me gifts. They want to give me money. And I can just walk away if I want to. And in fact, the daddies often talked about that too. So they'd say, oh, I'm so lucky, this worked out well. I know there's so many more people wanting a baby than can connect with them. And we kept scratching our head. What on earth? Because essentially, who has the money has the power. That's just understood, I think in almost any transactional relationship. But they were very adamant that the power dynamic was much more complicated than that in these relationships. And it bears listening, I think, that consideration anyway. Whether it's some happy delusion or not, there's different ways power is expressed in these relationships that sometimes favor the baby.
I'm sure. One thing I'm curious about is, do the young people, the sugar babies and the benefactors, if you will, do they describe their relationships under the same terms? Or if I ask, Susie baby who's dating Jimmy rich guy to describe their two relationships, you're going to get two very different descriptions of what's going on.
There was a lot of concordance, we thought, between them.
An agreement of the description.
Yeah, a lot of agreement. And it didn't fit with what we thought we would see in most research. And this is sex work, essentially. There's very few relationships that don't involve sex. It's understood. It's part of the deal. They think they have some decision-making power over that, but there seems to be relatively little. But do not call it sex work to them.
Right. I sort of view it as sex work, but I suppose there's a lot of debate in that community of people dating in this fashion, whether it is sex work or not. Why does that happen?
Well, I think because of the stigma really associated with sex work.
Sure.
In their sense, sex work proper. And you could argue so many relationships are transactional,
Sure.
Absolutely. And this is just more explicit and very much like relationships that are consensually non-monogamous, where there's a very detailed discussion about what's okay and what's not okay. We find that in sugar relationships, there's often that kind of explicit discussion about what I will and won't do, and when I will, and what I need, and how much it's, going to come with, and all sorts of very explicit discussion about a relationship. And they just approach it so practically. And in fact, the sugar babies would get somewhat annoyed because the sugar daddies, the one place we did see discordance was the sugar daddies would often develop feelings. And the sugar babies were like, that's not part of the deal.
It's very easy to make an agreement with an adult. Hey, we're not going to develop feelings for each other. But then in practice, when you're sleeping together, it doesn't work out that way.
We even know that if you don't want to fall in love, don't kiss someone. Kissing itself has a reaction of pheromonic complication that can make you fall in love with someone. And so it is a very challenging thing not to develop feelings for people as practical as you want to be about relationships.
There's got to be risks and downsides of these setups. They may not match what the public thinks when they're being judgmental and treating these things as scandal and as, with moral panic and these sorts of things. But there must be risks and downsides to the participants. What are they?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And the social stigma is huge. So most of this is hidden. They do not like to reveal this. There are some friends the sugar babies will share it with, but they tend to be other friends who are maybe wanting to be involved in that way. But the sugar daddies really don't. They love the idea of this beautiful young person on their arm, for instance, but do not want to be mistaken as someone who could not attract that person unless they had to pay them.
Interesting. So these people are not public about these arrangements at all with their friends.
It's certainly not the transactional nature of it, no.
Interesting. Would you consider this like a new form of dating, like those who are on the websites and like the websites are trying to plug it as, or it really is just sex work? And there's nothing wrong with that, but spade's a spade.
Right, absolutely. I've done a lot of research around the world, and I see it in other places and have for decades at this point. But yeah, we give it a new name. Actually, the sugar term is quite an old name for this, but we're applying it in a new, it's just much more familiar now to us as a type.
If a listener is tuning in and they're scandalized or they're curious, what's a takeaway about these sugar setups that you would want the average person who this is all completely new to, they're hearing about it for the first time, what would be a takeaway you would want them to learn about this all?
That, it's no replacement for intimacy. It's a very practical approach to relationships. If it's not necessarily an exchange of money, but it could be exchange of some commodity of some type. So
gifts, rent.
Absolutely gifts. So I guess park your morality and ethics and judgment at the door. It really has to be, it's not illegal, but it is a highly stigmatized activity still.
Lucia, I've enjoyed the chat. Thanks for coming on the show again. I appreciate your time.
Oh, thanks so much. It was fun.
Lucia O'Sullivan is a social psychologist at the University of New Brunswick.
holidays mean more travel, more shopping, more time online, and more personal info in more places that could expose you more to identity theft. But LifeLock monitors millions of data points per second. If your identity is stolen, our US-based restoration specialists will fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Don't face drained accounts, fraudulent loans, or financial losses alone. Get more holiday fun and less holiday worry with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit lifelock.com/podcast. Terms apply.